Welcome to the Wheelbarrow Profits Podcast, where you get multifamily investing made real. Learn from top players in the real estate investment world as they share their secrets with you and discover proven strategies on apartment investing that actually work. To learn more about Wheelbarrow Profits, visit jakeandgino.com, your one-stop shop for everything multifamily. Now to your hosts, Jake and Gino.
Hey guys, Jake here, and I want to direct your attention to our website, jakeandgino.com. For this month only, we're giving away a free online course called Investing in Mom and Pop Apartments. These are the types of apartments that we buy that we've had so much success with, and we want to share it with you. So jump on our website, jakeandgino.com, and get enrolled today. Now back to the show. Hello everybody, this is Jake Stenziano, host of the Wheelbarrow Profits Podcast, here with my co-host, the multifamily mentor, the coach, the chef, the father of six, the best-selling author, the G-Daddy, Gino Barbaro. Gino, how's it going?
Mr. Stenziano, I'm doing good. I know your mic's not doing good. Tell us that story about what's going on with the mic this morning.
Listen, I may have a box of ammo and a hat to hold it up because we're having some technical difficulties, but we got it. We're handling it. We're going forward. So we got a really exciting show today. Today's guests are Jenny DeSilva and Tammy Fatinos from Blueprint Housing. Now, Blueprint Housing is a national consulting services company with a mission of assisting clients in delivering exceptional, affordable housing and community development solutions. So what does that mean? Today, we are getting our Section 8 Learn On, and boy, do I need it. So, ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
It's our pleasure. Jenny, let's start with you. How did you get started in affordable housing?
Well, a lot of times you stumble upon it working up the ranks. You decide you want to be in property management. You might have some exposure to some conventional housing communities. And then you venture into your first Section 8 community or that another type of community with affordable housing contracts. The majority of the individuals that start working in the affordable housing arena do it at the site level. And most of them are kind of thrown into the compliance maze, and they learn it as they go, using their site level experience and then working their way up into the agent or the owner arena. But the majority of people in this industry don't necessarily seek it out and say, hey, I think I want to devote the rest of my life to affordable housing. But, you know, a lot of us have social worker hearts. A lot of people really like working with people, and thus it's a good fit for them with contact with the community.
Tammy, can you give us an overview before I get into all the questions and the teaching, just about the company Blueprint, about what you guys offer, what you do, your training, and all that for us?
So Blueprint Housing Solutions is unique in the sense that we really kind of offer a soup to nuts approach to the whole thing. We can help owners with all aspects of affordable housing, both in the sense of small, like I say, what we call mom and pop owners. They say they only own one property, to large management agents. We can also help them as well. And what we do is we take a very client-centric approach to what we do here. And so we have a number of offerings, both from policies and procedures on how to run the day-to-day operations of a property. We can do assistance on maintenance, on REAC inspections. Then we can also go up from there and help you work in your dealings with HUD in the compliance area, whether it's management and occupancy reviews, contract renewals, rent adjustments, adjusting utility allowances for residents. And where, like I said, we're unique is that we we'll take a client and we'll say, what is it that you need? And if they want us to just do the work for them, we have that option, or we can go to their site and train them to do the work. So we can either catch fish for our owners, or we can teach them how to be fishermen.
That is really good. I like that intro. My first question really is, what kind of myths do you guys hear about, Section 8, and how do you dispel those myths? What are the biggest myths that you get from investors?
I think most of us that are devoted to the affordable housing industry on a daily basis combat that stereotype of what you picture when you hear the term projects or the slums. Not every resident that lives in affordable housing is, a delinquent or mischievous with a criminal record and a drug problem. There's a lot of elderly residents, a lot of disabled residents, and families that are truly trying to better themselves and improve their situation that participate in this program. On the same side, there's a lot of nonprofit, faith-based type of industries or entities that participate very actively in the affordable housing industry that also work to dispel that stereotype of the slumlords that are fraudulently taking money from the government and the taxpayers, doing minimal maintenance on their sites, and not being, basically the gem of their community. So while there's always going to be, that isolated instance where someone really truly is not participating in the program appropriately, generally speaking, the majority of the housing industry are compliant. They try their best to do a good job in what is an ever-changing regulatory climate. And most of the entities take as much pleasure in providing safe, decent, and sanitary housing for their residents as the residents are to be able to receive it.
Can you go over the pros and cons participating in HUD's affordable housing programs? And I guess after that, can you just go over the various programs that are there?
Well, so I think, really one of the biggest pros that I see for it as from, say, an owner's perspective is that, vacancy is always, kind of an issue, right? And getting tenants to pay rent on time can be an issue. And what's great about the project-based Section 8 program is that usually vacancy is not a problem. There are pockets of the country and different types of programs that do experience vacancy, but say just in general, you have a multifamily property and you take Section 8 and it's project-based Section 8, you're going to stay full. And then what's nice about it then too is that so in general, the project-based Section 8 program, residents pay their rent is based on 30% of their income, and then the rest of that comes from subsidy from HUD. And so from an owner's perspective, guaranteed that if you've got a tenant in a unit, you're going to get 70% of that rent every single month, and the resident's going to pay that other portion of it. And so to me, I always say that seems to be the biggest pro right there, is that you've got this almost guaranteed source of revenue. As long as you're doing, the owner and the management agent are doing their part to keep the residents occupied, you've got a guaranteed source of income. Right. So the different HUD programs. So for us, we deal entirely with project-based Section 8. And again, that's where the subsidy lives with the unit. The tenants can move in and out of the unit, and then they just qualify as they move in, but the subsidy lives with the unit. There is also what's called tenant-based vouchers. That's where the subsidy lives with the tenant. And so say, for example, they have a $500 voucher. They then can take that voucher to any landlord who is willing to accept that voucher. And so say the rent at the property is, I'll use Austin rents. We'll say it's $1,000. And so if the owner is willing to take that voucher, $500 of that is covered by HUD, and then $500 would have to be covered by the resident. Then within project-based Section 8, there are different programs because they define who can live in a property. There are some properties that are solely elderly. There are some properties that are handicapped and elderly. And then there's some properties that are solely multifamily. And then there's some that are a mixture. Am I forgetting anything there, Jenny?
And in addition to the project-based Section 8 program, Blueprint also has several clients that participate in the PRAC program, which is a separate type of program devoted exclusively to elderly and disabled individuals. And much of the housing industry that entered into these Section 8 contracts did so in the late 70s and early 80s. Many of those properties have now started to look rather aged, and many of the attributes of its physical condition have basically lived their useful life, and a lot of them need some rehab or some facelifts. And so much of the industry is starting to layer multiple subsidy programs on the same site. So you could have a program that is Section 8, and it might also have what we call low-income tax credits layered on. That's their mechanism of utilizing private investors to help leverage significant physical rehabs to improve the conditions of these aging properties. So an added challenge to participating in this industry now is to really get to maximize your funding resources. You might have to answer to a few different agencies, both of which are providing you separate mechanisms of funding.
That makes sense. So I want to, I guess, transition into the cons or the negatives. I guess it sounds like a little bit of bureaucracy going on. But what about if that tenant doesn't pay? I mean, all of a sudden you're guaranteed 70% of the revenue. What happens if he doesn't pay that rent?
There are some mechanisms in place with HUD programs. It's something we call special claims for unpaid rent and damages. Mm-hmm. And it's an additional administrative task that an owner can complete in order to recapture a portion of that unpaid rent or damage assessed. Excuse me. But it's never going to really usually capture all of it. Mm-hmm. So that is a con. A con.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the residents could, I'll give Jenny a chance to get your breath. So, yes, a resident could not pay their rent. They could leave without giving you notice. But I think those are inherent problems with deciding to own apartment complexes, multifamily to begin with. The other con for certain is the level of regulatory burden that's on an owner and agent, especially if there is, say, layered subsidy, which Jenny was just talking about. So say it's a tax credit property, so you've got both the IRS regulations and the HUD regulations that you have to balance. And oftentimes, or sometimes, not often, I would say, sometimes those are at odds with each other. And so that can be very difficult. I would also say that interpreting federal guidelines is an art, not a science. Jenny and I can read the same paragraph in a HUD handbook, and you, Jake and Gino, could do the same thing, and we would have 4 different interpretations as to what was being said there. And so it sometimes can be very important to have a consultant if you're not familiar with the regulations to help you sort of maneuver those potential minefields of compliance issues. And I think that overall, if you talk to owners, that would be the number one con is that sometimes those regulations can become, some owners find those to be overly burdensome, but you weigh that again in the balance of guaranteed income coming in every month, and I think it does end up weighing out better.
And that's where Blueprint is really a nice fit for many people in the industry, regardless of what their budgetary limitations are to ensure compliance. We have some mom and pops that want to outsource everything to us, and they say, we're doing good at managing the physical asset. We collect the rent. We have a presence at the community, but we don't necessarily want to embark on understanding that compliance. We're going to outsource all of those tasks to you at Blueprint. So that's what we call kind of our back office or our full-scale client base. Mm-hmm. Some individuals might be hiring us for a larger portfolio of properties, and they might have some of those mechanisms in place where they don't need that same level of support, but they might want us to write their policies and procedures for them or renew their rents for them with the government. And so really we have the ability to customize how little or how much of that regulatory compliance work those clients need from us. What makes that relationship nice is that Blueprint is a constant for them, so they don't have to run the risk of hiring a manager investing in their training and their familiarity with the program, only for that manager to leave and then they're back at ground zero. So from a budgetary perspective, outsourcing compliance is often cheaper because you're not paying for our salary and our benefits and our overhead. That's a constant for you when you outsource. Another element that we offer to the industry, which is becoming increasingly more important of an aspect to the compliance, is the training. So we'll do live trainings, we'll do webinar trainings that don't even necessitate the travel for the staff. And that helps them stay abreast of what these constant regulatory changes are and how that impacts their daily operations.
Ladies, what do you see first-time investors like Jake and I? We haven't bought a Section 8 property yet. What do you see them struggle with when investing in these HUD programs?
I think the initial, it almost comes in waves. The initial hurdle is always going to be the running the property on the day-to-day basis in compliance with the regulations. So it then becomes important to either have a good partner or a very good property manager who has experience in that, because you've got to manage the wait list in accordance with the guidelines. You have to admit residents in accordance with the guidelines. You have to go through all of the vetting and the background, the income verification that you need to make sure you're not admitting residents who cannot be living there, right? So I think that's where you start, and then as you go along in the property, then suddenly you have a REAC inspection coming up, or you have an MOR coming up, and then you have to kind of deal with those regulatory compliances, and then annually you're going to either have to renew your Section 8 contract or get a rent adjustment with HUD or your contract administrator. And that's yet another level of compliance that you have to do. And so there are different levels of which you have to know certain things, and they don't always tie together. And, sometimes a management agent is really good at managing the property, but they don't, itself, the day-to-day operations of the property, but maybe they're not as good at submitting the voucher or doing the third-party verifications or doing the rent adjustment or the contract renewal. And so it's a lot of pieces that have to come together, and sometimes you've got to get that whole team behind it so that everyone is playing to their skill set.
Do you guys able to offer any additional resources to owners just acquiring these subsidized properties?
Yeah, we've got a strong network within the industry so that there are definitely entities that come into the picture a little earlier. So let's say you're toying with the idea of potentially acquiring your first HUD property. There's a significant amount of due diligence that needs to occur for you so that you basically know what you're getting into, you know what you're acquiring, and that you do your homework so that you know the condition of the property that you're acquiring and what potential corrections they may need to do, perhaps related to the prior payments that have been made. So when you acquire a property, you acquire the good, the bad, and the ugly elements of that.
Yeah.
So if you aren't doing your homework, sometimes you can walk into a transition where you're doing a significant amount of cleanup if somebody was negligent as the prior owner. But we have very strong connections with other entities in the industry that can facilitate with those other aspects. The refinancing, securing, whatever mortgage is most beneficial for you. Those are all other specialties where we have strong connections with individuals in the industry that is their wheelhouse.
And can I give another kind of example? So on one hand, you could, get a property that hasn't been taken care of or well maintained. But one area that I personally see a lot is, say an owner is interested in a property, it's in very good shape, and the rents are significantly below market. Okay, one of the benchmarks for this program is market rents, and they may say, well, gosh, I could buy this property and and take advantage of particular renewal options to bring the property up to market. But there's one particular renewal option that limits how the rents can be adjusted, and you can't get out of it for 30 years. And so I've had owners come in, buy a property, and think, oh well, I'm just going to get rid of this contract and get a new contract. And they can't for 30 years. And so that's where the due diligence really comes into play. And if you're not familiar with the project-based Section 8 program, finding someone who can advise you and tell you, what it is exactly you're getting yourself into.
Wow! Imagine Jake getting into a property and not being able to raise the rent for 30 years. That's a deal.
Inflation is real. That would scare the hell out of me.
Yeah, I mean there is a rent adjustment that happens every year, but it's not very large.
Yes, I can definitely see that.
Worst case scenario, we've had owners that have bought properties and found out after the transaction that there was a HUD contract on the property, so they didn't know that they were acquiring a Section 8.
Yeah.
That's a huge red flag that they probably didn't have a real extensive due diligence plan in place. So that's not to scare people from.
Scares me.
It's to scare you from embarking into what is often a very profitable venture for people who do it right and consult and truly weigh their options before they commit. This is a very profitable.
It doesn't scare me. I just know I need to call you first. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Well, Jake, and education dispels fear. It's just like anything else in life. Every time you do something the first time, we're all afraid of something.
Yep.
But don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. It's a great model if you like it, and then get on the phone with them and just really dig down deep and say, what do I need to do? And spend money on the front end. We're all cheap. We never want to spend money on the front end. But if you don't spend it on the front end, you find out it's Section 8.
You're in a 30-year contract and you're screwed. Yeah, so spend a couple bucks and figure it out.
Yep.
Yeah. Knowledge is power.
That's right. No, I agree. Let me ask you this question. How long must an owner of a subsidized property commit to the contract with HUD?
Well, so it depends on the contract that's in place.
Mm-hmm.
There is an option always to opt out of the contract and leave the program. It's not something we want to see happen because all the HAP contracts that are out there are the only HAP contracts there are ever going to be. HUD is not creating new housing contracts. And so we are very much in a preservation mode at HUD right now. And so we don't want people to opt out. But so if you say it just depends on the property. A property you could purchase might only be in a 5-year contract and it expires in, say, 2025. Or they could be in a 20-year contract. It just depends. Because you can't. The only way to opt out is to opt out at the end of a contract. So it really, there's no clear answer there, but there is the ability to get out if the person so wanted to.
So let me ask you a question. I don't know why, but why isn't HUD creating any new housing contracts?
Well, it's just not a priority.
We're doing good to fund and maintain the ones that are in existence. With the shrinking budgets in the current administration, there is no money to fund new development, new construction. So they're already, having to be a little creative with, massaging numbers here and there and making adjustments from one program to the next just to fund and maintain the current inventory that we have.
That makes sense. Ladies, how are subsidized properties monitored for compliance?
Depending on who is administering the contracts, some are directly administered by HUD. You might find, initially you might think that means it's a good thing and that you might have a really strong relationship with your HUD office. But oftentimes the HUD offices aren't staffed appropriately in order to be able to go out and put have a presence on the site. Other properties are administered by contract administrators, which are secured via contract with the federal government, and they oversee the portfolio on HUD's behalf. And in those instances, whether you're directly administered by HUD or you're overseen by a contract administrator, the primary mechanism for assessing the compliance is kind of twofold. One, you might have what I typically refer to as kind of a white glove physical inspection that's very detailed, goes into the common areas and the systems for the building and the interiors, the condition of the building in great detail, and that's called a REAC inspection. The other assessment is not solely based on physical condition, but it is designed to assess the compliance of the property's operation as a whole, and that's called a MOR, or a management and occupancy review. And those reviews are conducted by either HUD or the contract administrator, and those are the big audits. The reviewers go in, assess, is the property safety and sanitary? Are the benefits going to eligible households? Are the rents calculated correctly? Is the management following all of the current regulatory rules? And are there mechanisms in place to ensure there's not fraudulent activity? So those are the two means of being assessed with your program compliance. If you are administered by HUD and you may have layered subsidy with the IRS through the tax credit program, then the state agencies that administer the tax credit program on behalf of the IRS will also come in and do a compliance audit. So that's kind of one of the cons of having layered subsidy, is you might have 3 or 4 different audits a year by different people assessing your compliance.
So what's the advantage of having the multiple layers of at a single property?
Multiple sources of funding. That's the funding that gets you $3 or $4 million to do a significant rehab, get new siding on the property, new playgrounds, new unit kitchens, new carpeting, new lighting fixtures, new electrical, replacing boilers. That's what funds those major physical rehabilitations, is those layered funding mechanisms.
And those layered funding, can you give us an example or an idea of what terms are, as far as interest rates, amortizations, are they favorable to the owner?
Right now, so I can speak about HUD. I can tell you what HUD is offering, which, they work with particular lenders. For example, I think, oh gosh, no, I all the names just flew out of my head. But right now, the last I heard was that the average interest rate was about 4.3%. It's almost always, there are options. They're almost always a 30-year mortgage through HUD. So owners have an option. They can either get financing through HUD, and that is basically HUD insures the loan. They tell the lender, go ahead and give this person the money. We will go ahead and guarantee it. If you go out, as you know, to a private financer, they're going to want other assurances that you're going to make the mortgage, right?
Yes.
And so, but again, it's another level of that compliance, because if you have a HUD-held mortgage, you are also going to have to submit your annual financial statements to HUD so they can review those every year and make sure that you're, going to go ahead and still be able to cover the mortgage, right? They're going to always take a very vested interest in the financial operations of a property.
I guess when you have tax credits, you also have to commit to participating in the tax credit program. They have a compliance period. It usually is 20 years. Sometimes they'll tack on additional compliance periods, but you're committing in the long term, and that's how you get these better rates. Is you're promising to provide an inventory of affordable housing for a set period of time, and you can benefit with these good financing options.
I want to ask this question. I don't know if you might be able to answer this, but from an investor's perspective, I'm out there looking at properties. What's a value add? We hear value adds all the time. What are the value adds, or what are you looking for when you're investing in a Section 8 housing property that you can make money on, or that you can, grow the asset?
Depending on your funding resources, you're looking for healthy, healthy surrounding area. Maybe you've got some economic growth coming in where you've got the potential for some of your market rents to be robust and healthy, and there's demand for housing there. A lot of owners will go in and look at a property, and maybe it's got a significant amount of acreage, but the property was all single-story, duplexes or something like that. If they can get really creative with their financing, they might be able to rebuild the property and incorporate, maybe like a high-rise building and a parking garage where you've got commercial space, you've got additional units being added to the same plot of land because you're building up. And so a lot of times from an investor standpoint, they look for those types of properties that they can buy for a fair price and double, sometimes triple the amount of units that they redevelop the land just by building up, and then creating, additional revenue sources with market units sprinkled into the unit count for the affordable units, and then you've got some commercial income potential as well.
I like that. Let me ask you both a question. I guess if you could both answer this, what would your best tip on HUD investing be for the listeners?
I would say this, from my perspective, I would say stay engaged. There is always something new that's either just been released that impacts you or is scheduled to be released. So the more engaged and connected you can stay with the industry, the better prepared you're going to be to react to whatever that change is that impacts you. Generally speaking, the owners and the agents that participate in industry associations, are engaged with clients and outsource some of these compliance specialties. They are more connected and prepared for what's coming. What scares us to death are the small mom and pops that are out there that have no idea what's going on in the industry. They've stuck their heads in the sand like ostriches and pop up one day and decide that that they're going to try and figure that out, and they're 10 years behind the curve. Those are the ones that struggle in the industry. So you've got to stay engaged. And like you said, oftentimes you pay for the professional help because they will end up steering you in a better direction than you kind of aimlessly wandering down different paths that may or may not be beneficial to you or to your property.
Yeah, and I would also add one last thing that, just if you're looking to invest in a HUD property, know that because it does challenges that interaction with HUD also isn't easy to extricate from. So, like I said, for example, earlier I mentioned the fact that you can opt out of the program, but you can't actually kick out the residents. They have a right to stay there for as long as they want to stay there. And so just knowing that sort of that touch of HUD stays with that property for a very long time, and you have to know really well what you're getting into. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
You're scaring me even more and more, but that's okay. That's why I'm going to continue to educate myself, and because we've been looking at a couple HUD deals, and like you said, you just get nervous. You start looking at it. You start looking at the contracts. It can be a little cumbersome for guys who are used to dealing with market and less bureaucracy, but that shouldn't hold anybody back from actually looking at the opportunities, because right now there's less deals out there. So if you can actually expand your horizons and try to look into other types of assets, I think that's always a positive, because the more deals you can look into, the more luck you're going to have. So this is just another avenue for us to look into.
Right. And, I'm not a real estate developer, so I can't really speak to sort of that idea, except that it seems like in any kind of area, a venture like this, diversifying your portfolio, that term for your financial thing also would apply to this. And so if you are, very heavily invested in multifamily, having a HUD property can be very intimidating because of the level of compliance. But I think you'd be surprised. It's all very logical. It really isn't it's not rocket science. It's, follow the rules, color inside the lines, and you'll be fine. And once you kind of get in the groove of doing that, I think most owners would find it's actually a very easy system to work within in order to gain the benefits that you do gain and get to help people in the process, because, we haven't talked about that, but there is that aspect of the fact that, you as an owner are, you might be, you're going to profit, you could potentially profit off of this venture, but you're also helping people at the same time. And if that's something that you're interested in doing more of, then this is an opportunity to do that.
Hey, Jake, this is great. We're both not rocket scientists, so we can do this. And we both have crayons, and we like the crayons, so color. So this is great for us. I think we've got a future in this.
I just don't want to hit the lines. That's what I struggle with. That's why I'll call blueprints, so they can keep me inside the lines.
That's right, that's what we do.
What about significant changes within the industry? Is there anything within affordable housing that's coming up, or any significant changes on the horizon?
Well,
chuckle.
That's a question that you could ask every day and get the same answer, and that is that there's always changes coming down the pike. There's always budgetary changes. There's always new regulatory changes that have significant impact on your daily operations. There's always systems updates that are prompted by those regulatory changes that cause you to have to kind of work with the software that you use at your property to maintain your rents, your accounting, your mechanisms of requesting the subsidy from HUD. There's a lot of lingo that I could go into there that would
gloss me over.
Yeah, but make you feel like I was speaking a different language. Yeah. But there are always new regulations. A lot of them, are real significant. Some examples that I can give you. HUD has oftentimes established major initiatives based on executive orders, and they prompt regulatory changes. So, as an industry, the Department of HUD has prioritized combating homelessness. So homelessness initiatives are very big right now. Protecting victims of domestic violence is something that's been initiated through what we call VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, and that has had a significant impact on leasing and eligibility operations at these properties. There's always things that are going to be initiated through laws that are going to impact this industry. The LGBT community right now has a lot of new protections afforded to them in the housing industry because of what we call HUD's equal access rule. So a lot of these things that you hear about in the national news, in one form or fashion, end up having an impact on this industry.
Now, but another sort of way to emphasize too what Jenny talked about earlier for owners to stay engaged and to always do this is that whenever HUD makes a regulatory change, it's a long, slow ramp up. There's usually, it goes out for public comment, and the industry gets to comment, and then you get to comment on the comments, and so it will usually take. Oftentimes. A final rule can take, Jenny, 2 to 3 years, depending on the complexity of the rule. I think VAWA took, which is Violence Against Women Act, took 4 years.
Well, it was actually initiated originally in 2007.
Okay, well then there you go, 10 years. So it's never like. What's nice is what I'm trying to say is the government doesn't just spring something on you. You usually have plenty of warning that it's coming and plenty of time to make that slow turn that sometimes. An organization needs to take to do things differently.
But Blueprint helps all of their clients prepare for that and actually kind of be ahead of the curve, because we are so incredibly involved and connected with the policy folks up in D.C. that are actually writing these notices, writing these regulations for the owners and agents. We are part of working groups that discuss the impact that has on the industry. We can kind of voice the owner agent's perspective there. It's one thing, this is the number one takeaway we give our clients, especially in our trainings, is it's one thing to write a regulation, put it down on paper, and shove it out to the industry. It is a completely different ball of wax to actually implement it, digest it, and implement it into your daily operations. And that's where people struggle, is they have good intentions, they know about a rule, they don't understand what it means to them, they put it on the back burner, and then 6 or 7 months down the road, they're getting assessed for their compliance, and they're told they're out of compliance with that regulation that they heard about but kind of dropped the ball on. That's where Blueprint assists people. We help people not drop the ball.
Doesn't it seem to simplify this whole, because I think everyone recognizes the need for affordable housing. To streamline this entire industry, if you will, wouldn't it make more sense just to go to some massive voucher program and give people choice, just to streamline and simplify this entire affordable housing problem?
Well, for two guys who don't claim to know a lot about the industry, you sort of just hit on a very kind of hot button topic right now. And that is that, on one hand, sure, right? Like, give everybody a voucher.
No, and I really don't. That's a sincere thing, because I'm listening to all this, and my head is spinning, and it seems to me the common sense solution is to just give people choice, give people that need it the voucher, let them go into the marketplace, and let the market serve them.
Right. Well, and so again, like I said, what you just said is incredibly insightful. It also, unfortunately, is, and this isn't a slam against you or anything, turns out to be incredibly naive. Only because what happens is a lot of owners don't want that voucher. It's either the perception of who has a voucher, the types of people that need affordable housing assistance, who they are, where they come from.
NIMBYism. Yeah. Not in my backyard.
Yeah, not in my backyard. And so what happens is, for example, we live in Austin, Texas, and this is, of course, one of the most popular places to live. It is also now incredibly expensive to live in this town. And the other problem is that we have a number of families who, say get a voucher, but they can't find anyone to take it. And so that's where the problem lays. Is, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, there was a show on Frontline on PBS, which I highly recommend that you go watch it, because it illustrates this problem. Because they told the story of this one woman who finally got a voucher, but then she could never ever find anyone to take it. And so after like 18 months, if you don't use the voucher, you lose it and you go back to the bottom of the line. And so the problem is twofold, because yes, it would be great to give people choice. Then they could choose where they live, where they could put their kids in better school districts, and they could have access to transportation and better jobs. But if a landlord is not willing to accept that voucher, then it does them no good.
And even if we came up with this grand plan of consolidating all of these programs and offering one kind of sole source of subsidy, transitioning to that grand idea is quite a task when you're asking different federal agencies, whether it's USDA Rural Development, whether it's HUD, whether it's IRS, or all of these other federal agencies that in some form or fashion play a role in affordable housing. They don't always play nice together based on whatever the political climate might be. They kind of butt heads. They don't necessarily defer to each other or make concessions. And so getting those programs to actually physically consolidate, even if the dream came true, would be nearly impossible because the federal agencies don't always collaborate and play nice. Kinda
got it.
Well, Jake, it comes back down to leadership. If you have a strong leader who has the vision, who wants to do it, and is going for the common good, it can get done. But right now, these guys can't even pass a budget. So can you imagine trying to get all these federal agencies all together? So I totally see both sides of the coin on this one.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right. So how can listeners get a hold of you? I think is the most important thing, because obviously we're not getting anywhere. We're going to stay in the current environment that we're in. So we have a service that we need to get out there to the folks. So what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, right now, all of our services, products, training offerings, leadership information is all available on the web. So it's www.blueprinthousing.org. We also have a Facebook page. We currently do not tweet, but we are available on the Facebook media arena. We are also very good about just answering the phone. So if you ever want to call us, our number is displayed again on our website. It's also 512-767-7723. Is a direct line to myself, to Jenny. And we are always willing to talk to clients, because a lot of times the clients that call us don't exactly know what they need. And sometimes they might say, well, tell us everything that you do. But what's nice is we can customize a package. They can throw together different elements kind of a la carte to whatever is going to meet their immediate needs, while simultaneously adhering to whatever budget limitations they have.
And so we did call. We did call a few months ago, so they do answer. We did have this conversation.
Yes, we are people, humans on the other side.
That's right.
And we are not, because we are a nonprofit entity, we are not driven exclusively by our profits. Everything that we as an entity earn, we redevelop and reinvest into our community. So we are very good at being creative and creating a plan or an engagement with our clients that is mutually beneficial.
Well, very cool. Gino, do you have anything else?
I guess the only last thing I would say is, if you're seriously considering, Section 8, get on the horn with them as soon as possible. When you start your, financial due diligence, get on the horn, find out what's going on, and don't be afraid of it. I mean, tackle it, embrace it, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, just keep looking and just try to keep as many options open as possible, because Jake and I are up against it right now. We're looking at a couple deals that are Section 8, and we were afraid at the beginning, and that's why I reached out to them. I was fortunate enough to have somebody in the Jake and Gino community give me their number, and like Jake said, I called them right away. They got on the phone. We spent a good hour talking on the phone, which was great, and it enlightened us. It allayed our fears a little bit, and that's why we're here talking right now, because we want to share this, amazing information with our entire community.
Knowledge is power, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Jenny, Tammy, thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies. Have a great day.
We trust that you enjoyed the Wheelbarrow Profits podcast. Visit jakeandgino.com, your one-stop shop for everything multifamily. See you next time when Jake and Gino share more of their investing secrets with you.